What is going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to another edition of Touchline Talk right here on 110 Sports. So much to get to today. We're going to talk all things MLS is back Cup final. Congratulations to the Portland Timbers. We're going to do our MLS is back all tournament team. But there's nowhere else to start today than what happened with PSG and Atalanta yesterday. What a way to start the Champions League quarterfinals. You just can't ask for a better form of entertainment and a better game than we got. And we talked about this with JJ Devaney on the supporters corner, and I was right there with him. Yes, Bayern Barcelona is obviously the biggest matchup in terms of prestige of the quarterfinals, but this was the most interesting one, and it absolutely lived up to its billing and then exceeded all expectations. And 85 minutes in, I was prepared to come on here today and say, if PSG ever wants to win this tournament, they need to blow this up because this group of players just cannot do it. This is not a managerial problem. This is a mentality problem, and it starts with Neymar on down. Changing the manager is not going to fix the problems that they've had in this tournament. This is not on Thomas Tuchel. They had the same problems with Unai Emery before him. It's been a trend with this team. They have come up short time and time again. But then the end of this game happens. But from the beginning, let's start there. So you've got Mbappe on the bench. He's not healthy enough to start. You've got no Verratti, no Di Maria. You're missing a lot of pieces up front if you're PSG. Now, they're still loaded. It was still a good enough attack. But you're looking at Neymar, and this is the kind of game you pay that money for Neymar to go win for you. Icardi and Sarabia were missing the entire game. This was about Neymar. And then Neymar found a way to simultaneously be the best player on the field and the one who would have been most responsible if his team didn't actually win this game. And Atalanta comes out doing what Atalanta does. That high press was so good in the first half. It stopped PSG from playing out of the back. It made Keylor Navas uncomfortable. It disrupted PSG's rhythm. But Atalanta is not sound defensively. Never have been. It's why they didn't win Serie A despite scoring all those goals this year. And so Neymar kept finding spaces. And PSG kept finding chances. That first one, I mean, when he chipped it, I thought that's a goal. Easy. And he sailed that thing 5 yards wide. I've never seen something quite like that before. I would much rather have Neymar be doing that, though, than not being anywhere to be seen on the field like his attacking counterparts were. To me, Neymar showed up. Now, you got to finish those chances, too. It's not like he is protected or safe from criticism because that was I don't know what was going on inside his head with some of those chances. But it very easily could have been 3-0 PSG with a Neymar hat trick at halftime. You know, Atalanta was able to impose their style and do things the way they wanted, but that still didn't mean they were going to win this game. But then you get Neymar continues to just waste his chances, and Pasalic gets one, and that was a phenomenal goal. And all of a sudden, it's game on, and PSG. It just got to a point where you're thinking it's going to be another one of those games where they just can't find a way to do it when it matters most. But then you bring on Mbappe, and you get this thing going. And you get the goal. And, Neymar then also contributes to the second goal. You get these 2 goals within 3 minutes. And all of a sudden, you're through. It's incredibly harsh to Atalanta. But I go back to what I just said about it could have been 3-0 PSG at halftime. They just didn't take the chances. It's not like it was a horrendous performance. Now, they would have nobody but themselves to blame if they couldn't have put the ball in the back of the net. But to me, this is absolutely, absolutely massive for PSG. I was ready to come on here and say you can't continue to throw this group of players out there and expect a different result. Doesn't matter who the manager is. They just, for whatever reason, cannot find the mental fortitude to win a game like this. But they did it. They did it when time after time this PSG team has not been able to. They lost in the round of 16 the last 3 seasons. It was the quarterfinals and the Barcelona catastrophe before that. They have earned this reputation by failing over and over again at the later stage of this tournament, which is all that matters for this team because you're basically guaranteed a Ligue 1 title year in and year out with the amount of money that they have at their disposal. This is what it's about for PSG. And they found it. You know, it wasn't particularly Neymar and Mbappe, but they still contributed and were still a presence. You know, you get your... And it wasn't one of their high-profile guys. It was Choupo-Moting who finally got that goal to send them through. You know, it was a collective performance. It was not pretty, but to me, I almost would rather have it that way if I'm PSG. This is the kind of game that they just don't win. And this is the kind of opponent that they really struggle against because, of course, you're expected to beat Atalanta. It's Atalanta. I mean, this is, you know, PSG is, and I think it was Jamie Carragher or maybe Roberto Martinez who made the point after the game. PSG is much better when PSG feels like PSG is the underdog. But when you're playing with that kind of money and those kind of expectations, you just can't trick yourself into thinking you're the underdog. But all of a sudden, when you're down a goal at the end of the game with nothing to lose, you can sort of summon that mentality. But to me, this is a defining moment for this group of players, particularly Neymar. Whether he eventually leaves or not, who knows where PSG goes from here, how far they can go in this tournament, and what happens as Real Madrid and Barcelona and these teams sort of regroup and go again and retool. But this is just, we have not seen that kind of ability to just find a way to win. It has been missing from this team since this group of players was put together, and they finally did it. And from Atalanta's perspective, I'm torn because on one side of the equation is the reality that this team may never get back to this point. You know, this is not your Barcelonas or your Liverpools or some of these other teams where you look at and go, oh, they'll be back. Or Juventus, you know. Nobody's wondering about whether Juventus can be good in this tournament again next season. Juventus is going to be fine. You can't just guarantee that Atalanta is going to be back at this point in the near future. So, of course, it's a crushing defeat. It's a cruel defeat because they were so close. But they spent so much energy in the first half, and they just stopped playing their game in the second half. And when you're that suspect defensively, when you are that built on going forward, being the aggressor, doing things differently than most teams under Gasperini, you got to stick with it. Because if you let PSG come at you for 30, 45 minutes, odds are they're going to score at least one goal. You know, it was coming. And a lot of that had to do with tired legs. And so I think we, to a certain extent, found out an answer about whether you would rather have to shake off the rust of only playing, you know, these cup finals that PSG has been in these past handful of months and not really getting any competition, or whether you're playing a string of competitive Serie A games in addition to now going into the Champions League, because those guys were just exhausted for Atalanta. Absolutely exhausted. And when you can bring Mbappe on, that's the difference in the game. And yes, Atalanta could have absolutely used Josip Ilicic. Maybe that makes a difference. You know, the freshness of PSG, the depth of PSG won out in this game. Atalanta nearly held on. But the other thing I want to say about Atalanta. Right, so they're not a team that you're looking at going, well, they're just going to be back next year and have another go at this. But at the same time, they're also not Ajax of a couple of seasons ago, where you're looking at, last year, where you're looking at that team going, okay, these are a bunch of elite academy prospects that are 21, 22 years old that we know we're not holding on to. That our club is not designed to hold on to Frankie de Jong and Matthias de Ligt. We're designed to sell them to fund the next elite prospects coming through the Ajax Academy. You knew that group was breaking up, and that group was breaking up that summer. There was just no way those players were going to stay. This is a very different situation for Atalanta. This is a bunch of Martin de Roons who they got from Middlesbrough. It's not like these are a bunch of guys who are super young and on their way up, and that, you know, Barcelona, Real Madrid, Juventus, go down the list, are clamoring for. Gasperini built this team the way he wanted to, and he found these guys and is getting the absolute most out of them. Which means that there's actually, there's a real chance that, and they're back in the Champions League next season. And when you put that kind of performance up against PSG, these guys have to be sitting there going, we were so close. We can do this. We can make a run at a Serie A title, maybe. We can make a run at the Champions League again next year. Of course, it's not guaranteed. You can't just expect it. But the idea that this is a one-time thing for Atalanta, I don't quite buy it. I think there is a real chance that you look into, when these groups are drawn next Champions League, you look at Atalanta and you say, there's a pretty good chance that they can get out of their group. They're not going to be the best team in their group, but they could very easily be the second best team in their group on paper. And these guys are so well drilled in what they do now. It's not the end of an era for Atalanta, which is the exciting part of this. This is a legitimately good team. And yes, it would have been a huge upset just from the financial perspective and the idea that it's Atalanta and PSG. But talent-wise, it just wasn't that far apart. Atalanta really is that good. So, yes, it's a crushing defeat. To me, this is almost more about PSG actually finding a way to win that game, though. That, yes, of course, everybody wants to talk about the Cinderella story, and it's hard to cheer against this Atalanta team. They're everything you want. Small team, small budget, fun to watch, tactically fascinating. They've got it all. But PSG found a way to win this game when it looked like they were going to capitulate again in a situation they had no business losing. I gotta give them credit. Still don't know if they've got enough to win this tournament. We'll see what Mbappe looks like and what his health situation is moving forward. But that, to me, that was something different from PSG. And that can't get lost in the disappointment for Atalanta and just the thrill of this game. We have not seen that kind of resiliency from PSG before. And that's what you have to play with the big boys in Europe. They found something. Neymar showed up, was able to overcome a very poor first half. But if that happens again in the semis, they're done. He has to finish those chances. They have to be better. But give him credit for finding a way to win this one sometimes. And again, you're facing the disadvantage of it being one leg. This is played right into this idea of how Atalanta can win this game. PSG doesn't take their chances. Atalanta finds a superb goal and just hangs on for dear life. Two legs, probably not able to do that kind of thing. But in 90 minutes, Atalanta almost did it. But right at that 90th minute, PSG found a way, got a second goal, and are going through to the semifinals. Just a fascinating, amazing way to start the quarterfinals. If we get 3 more games like that, we're absolutely spoiled rotten. Let's hope things just continue to be that dramatic and that fun to talk about, that fun to watch. Also want to touch here on the Europa League. We're into the semifinals now. Shakhtar Donetsk get a comfortable 4-1 win over Basel. They get a set-piece goal in the second minute off of a corner kick, and that was pretty much the game. Very comprehensive. This is a good team. I picked them to win this one. They're sort of your, as I mentioned this briefly on Tuesday, your representative of the non-traditional, big leagues in Europe, just hanging in there. They're always technically gifted. They have a history of success in Europe. So they're still alive. The higher profile matchup was Wolves-Sevilla. Sevilla gets an 88th minute goal from Lucas Ocampos to take down Wolves. Raul Jimenez missed a penalty kick in the 13th minute. Wolves were on top of things in the first half for the most part. But then halftime came, and it's one of those games where it's cliche, but it was really a tale of two halves, just like Atalanta PSG was. Sevilla just kept coming at them after halftime, and Wolves had no answer. For a team that's so good going forward and has so many technically gifted midfielders, it was somewhat jarring to see how easily Sevilla just continued to hold on to the ball and continued to put pressure on that Wolves defense. And that Wolves defense is, I've said this before, the most underrated part of that team. They hung in there. It was a really good defensive performance. They just couldn't get anything going forward. But then you get the late goal, courtesy of Ever Banega, who was the best player on the field. And Sevilla are deserving winners, and they're going through to the semifinals. And this is a Sevilla team that finished with the same amount of points in La Liga as Atletico Madrid, who's playing for a spot in the Champions League quarterfinals. Sorry, Champions League semifinals today. They finished with the same point total in La Liga this season. This is a really good Sevilla team that I wanted to touch on for a second here because we haven't really talked about them much yet. But now that they're in the semis, different group, different manager, but they won the Europa League in 2013, 14, 14, 15, and 15, 16. They are very comfortable in this competition. This is the kind of team that, even though they're already in the Champions League next year, this is just the kind of team that has success in this tournament. That sort of second tier in your bigger leagues in Europe, where you don't have to face your Atletico Madrids, Real Madrids, Barcelonas, Bayerns, go down the list. But when you're facing your Wolves and even Manchester United, is they're going to have to play eventually. That's their gift, is you get Manchester United for winning this game. But this is the kind of team that can absolutely win this tournament. And they've been good this year, sort of flying under the radar, so I wanted to give them some love. It was a really good performance. I was impressed. I thought Wolves would win that game, and I was wrong. Sevilla was the better team, deserved to win. And it's a crushing defeat for Wolves because all of a sudden you go into next season, no European competition, which also means they're going to be incredibly dangerous in the Premier League because that's all they have to focus on. And when you give those, that was part of their problem, especially at the beginning of this year, is how do you navigate the Europa League? And they don't have the deepest roster in the world. That squad's pretty tight, and they had some trouble with it. But now you don't have that issue. So that's, I guess, the good news in a very disappointing performance for Wolves is that it's just about the Premier League next season, and you're going to need all your attention with the amount of improvement we've seen from your Manchester Uniteds and Chelseas of the world, as we've talked about before. Outside of those couple things, I want to talk about a couple United States things quick before we go to our first break. Racing Louisville FC, the newest member of the NWSL, has hired a coach, Christy Holly. Christy Holly is engaged to Christy Pierce, formerly Christy Rampone, star of the U.S. Women's National Team. Holly had one other stint in the NWSL with Sky Blue, 14 wins, 7 draws, 17 losses, which is not a poor record considering what Sky Blue was at that moment in time. But this just seems a little strange. I don't have some deep, profound thought, but it just seems like you could get a little bit better track record in terms of a manager with the momentum this league has, the kind of appeal that building something in Louisville has. And this is, this club is decision-wise, personnel-wise is being run by James O'Connor, as I mentioned before, former Orlando City and Louisville City coach, who's sort of overseeing the big picture of this. We'll see. Holly is still really young. He's had some time to learn. He's worked as a scout. It's not it's not a soccer acumen question, but it just feels like with some of the other pedigrees you have in this league, you could have done a little bit better, been a little bit more ambitious, I guess, because I don't even want to say better. We'll see what Holly can do. But that is your NWSL news. Racing Louisville FC have a coach as they get ready to come into this league. And the other thing, Blaise Matuidi is now a member of Inter Miami. And this is reportedly not a designated player deal, which is very important when evaluating this because the idea of bringing in a 33-year-old midfielder when that team has a gaping hole at striker and generally in its attack, not good. But the idea of bringing in a World Cup winner who still is trying to play for the French national team on a non-DP deal that then allows you to go buy your attacker and spend the big money there as well makes a lot of sense and seems much better and a home run for Inter Miami. We'll see how long he stays, but your risk is really low at this point. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But I mean, this was a guy that was at Juventus and has won a World Cup and made a French World Cup squad, which is a pretty impressive accomplishment in and of itself. This makes a lot of sense for Inter Miami. They finally have a name. It's not the highest profile, splashy, attacking-minded name that we kept hearing they were going to get, from David Silva to Luis Suarez and going down the line. But this is one of those guys who just makes your team better. And I love getting players like this in MLS. You can go find attackers, but just getting these experienced guys who have been in the top leagues in Europe, who have played at the highest level, and bringing them here, I just feel like it. Again, he's not a big name in the that when you're comparing him to Wayne Rooney or David Beckham or Zlatan or something. But I just love midfielders that do all of the little things, and Matuidi's that kind of player. You see it in Portland, and we'll talk about them when we get to segment 2 here in a minute. So I really like this for Inter Miami. I would have had real questions if it was a DP deal. He just doesn't fit what they need. But as an additional piece to put into this team to make them better, to help out, give them a little bit more oomph in the middle of the park. Really like it. Always here for guys who played it, like I said, at the highest level, who have that pedigree, who won a World Cup coming to MLS. There's some questions about the age and how long he can make an impact, but 33 is not what it used to be, and he can at least come in for a couple seasons and really help Inter Miami. This team is not as far away as it looked like they were in Orlando, in my opinion. They just got some tough breaks, and again, they don't have the attacker. But all of a sudden, you've got a solid defense, you've got Matuidi in midfield, and if you can get that final piece in there, then we're talking about a team that can absolutely make the playoffs and go and do some damage moving forward. So, David Beckham convinced him to come. Blaise Matuidi's in Inter Miami. We'll see how this thing goes, but I like it on the surface. It makes a lot of sense to me. You didn't take a huge risk here, so if it doesn't work, not the end of the world. But I think he could really be a nice piece for them moving forward. All right. Break 1 coming up now. When we come back, all things MLS is back. My thoughts on the final between Portland and Orlando, and my all-tournament team. You won't want to miss that. You're watching Touchline Talk on 110 Sports. And welcome back to Touchline Talk. As I said before the break, it's MLS's back time. Congratulations to the Portland Timbers. You get the victory. That's all that matters at the end of the day. I picked Seattle to win this tournament for basically the same reason that Portland ended up winning this tournament, which is that they are built to win multiple ways. They're good enough defensively to bother you, to make things ugly, to win those kind of games, but also good enough going forward to make a difference that way too. It's not like they're completely reliant on playing defense. They've got difference makers, and you saw it all tournament long with Sebastian Blanco, who was just named MVP this morning, deservedly so. He would have been my MVP as well. And so it's just this beautiful balance that they're so good defensively, as I've talked about before. Diego Chara just does Diego Chara things, and then you get the difference makers going forward. Jeremy Abobasi was great at the center forward position during this tournament. And in the final in particular, I said this beforehand, and the first thought that came to my mind when Portland scored that opening goal, Orlando is in trouble, because now Portland just can sit back, do their thing, and make life miserable for the Nanis of the world. But then Nani, I feel like nobody's talking about how good of a cross that was. I thought that was a sensational ball he played in, to just find a way to get that into a dangerous area. And Pereira gets on the end of it, and all of a sudden it's 1-1. But Orlando was never able to get Portland out of the way that they played, really. And so you get another goal from a center back. Portland's attack was not as good as it has been in this tournament. Your Blancos and Valeries and players like that. But they got 2 goals from center backs. It was just a very Portland Timbers finding a way to get the job done win. But at the end of the day, and Giovanni Savarese pretty much said this, they got to do exactly what they wanted to, and with the way this team's playing, you're just not beating them when they get to play games on their terms. To me, they were the best team in this tournament from start to finish in terms of consistency. Orlando had a terrific run. You're going to take all kinds of momentum from this. They're a legitimately good team who should make the playoffs, assuming that the season actually finishes and goes to its conclusion. That you've got to feel really good if you're Oscar Pereira, and just the idea of getting to a final for a team that hadn't even made the playoffs before. It was a phenomenal run. It's just at the end of the day, to me, Portland has difference makers in every aspect of the game, and I'm just not sure Orlando's quite there yet. Obviously, you have Anani, but particularly that center defensive midfield and the emergence of Eric Williamson, it just makes Portland really difficult to deal with, and they've been there before. But the other thing I would like to say, in credit to Orlando came here absolutely from day one to win this tournament. And I don't know that you could say that about every team, that Orlando was specifically focused on actually putting together a really good performance here. And they were able to do that. So props to them. Give them a lot of credit for coming in focused. And overall, I think this was a general success. Of course, you don't want to lose 2 teams early, and there was a moment where it looked like it might get shut down. But everybody did their jobs for the most part, and you have a winner. And at the end of the day, that's what this is about. So congratulations to Portland. Really enjoyed this tournament. I would like to... It's probably a little bit of an unpopular opinion. I like the idea of trying to find a way to make this a thing every year with certain qualifications and things. I don't want it to change too much the way that MLS operates, but I think there's absolutely a place for this. I love the idea of incentivizing every team to come play and play for something, like you saw with Orlando. It's a trophy and it's a spot in the Champions League, the CONCACAF Champions League, but Champions League nonetheless. That I really like the idea of finding a way to get everybody excited again and feel like they have a chance to win something. Or the other thing you could do is just convince teams to actually take the U.S. Open Cup seriously. There are about 4 that do, and those 4 teams do well pretty much every season. Cups are fun, and the U.S. needs to do a better job of finding a way to make that part of the soccer culture of this country, and I think MLS is back certainly help with that, because teams were focusing on this in a way that they weren't U.S. Open Cup, which doesn't quite make sense to me, but obviously it's extenuating circumstances, and you got a Champions League spot and all of those things. So for our team of the tournament now, Going to play a 4-2-3-1. In goal, Andre Blake. Easy call for me. His 32 saves were 11 more than any other keeper in this tournament, and he didn't even play in the final. He was the best goalkeeper in this tournament. He kept Philadelphia afloat when their offense was not functioning at the highest level. He looked like one of these elite CONCACAF goalies that he was a couple of years ago, but he had really struggled to just be consistent these past couple seasons. This looked like the DeAndre Blake that won MLS Goalkeeper of the Year. He was sensational, absolutely the best goalkeeper of this tournament. In defense, right back, Ruan. He just added another dimension to Orlando's attack. He gave them that width and the ability for Nani to cut inside and to do different things. And, Chris Mueller was more the one playing on his side of the field. But he was so good going forward. He's got so much energy. He just makes life difficult for other teams. When you get those fullbacks that are not only willing but capable of going forward and adding something to the attack, it changes the complexion of your offense. And Ruan was a big part of why Orlando was so good offensively in this tournament. Center back, Dario Zuparic of Portland. I wanted to put a Portland center back in there just as an acknowledgement of what they were able to do. So you might as well go with the guy who scored the tournament deciding goal. Both of them ironically got goals in the final, as I mentioned, but I'll give the edge to Zuparic. Other center back is Mark McKenzie. He was the most impressive central defender at this tournament for me. There's a reason why all of a sudden you're hearing things about Celtic being super interested in him going to Europe, which will happen in the near future. He was really good for that Philadelphia team. Left back, John Moutinho. So much improvement from this guy. I mean, and particularly going forward. When he was at LAFC, he just didn't seem like a real threat in the attack. And Bob Bradley gave up on him pretty quickly. And he ended up in Orlando and has solidified himself as a starter at the left back spot. He's also, can play center back. It's not like he's an offensive minded player like a Ruan playing on the other side of that back four for Orlando. But he scores a massive goal against LAFC. He's just improved so much. He was really good. And again, that improvement on defense overall is the reason Orlando was able to stay around in this tournament so long. They are a good defensive team now, which is something you haven't been able to say since they've joined Major League Soccer pretty much. My defensive midfield pairing, Eric Williamson and Edward Atuesta. I've been talking about Williamson. Williamson stole the show in this tournament. He kind of came out of nowhere and solidified himself as a really good midfielder in this league. And in addition to all of the Darlington Nagbe comparisons he's drawing and the way that he worked with Diego Chara to make life difficult for everybody they were playing, he also had 2 game-winning assists. He made a difference both defensively and offensively. He gave him the ability to connect passes and to play from your holding midfielders to that attacking midfield trio that Diego Chara just usually doesn't because he's so defensive-minded and he's excellent at what he does. But his skill set is somewhat limited. So having a multi-dimensional player like Williamson was phenomenal for Giovanni Savarese in Portland. He was great, absolutely deserves a spot on this team. And I had to put Edward Atuesta here. I don't care that they lost as early as they did. He was remarkable. And there's an argument for Darlington Nagbe in this spot too. But to me, there were a couple midfielders, and particularly at Atuesta, that went out early that were just better than the guys who were still remaining. When you look at a Philadelphia midfield, a Minnesota midfield, Orlando behind Nani and Pereira, he's just so good. I wanted to put him in here. I'm not apologizing for it. To me, he was one of the best 11 players at the tournament. I think he's phenomenal. I love this LAFC midfield. I talked about it multiple times on this show before. Huge fan of Edward Atuesta. And then our attacking trio behind our striker. On the left, Nani. No surprise here. 3 goals, 4 assists. Was great from start to finish for Orlando. Created their goal in the final. Scored the penalty kick that knocked out LAFC. He's obviously the heart and soul of everything they do. Orlando doesn't get to the final if it's not for Nani, so he absolutely deserves a spot on this team. I put Sebastian Blanco in the middle of this three as my center attacking mid, if you will. MVP, 2 game winning goals, 5 assists. He was remarkable. And his ability to make the difference offensively is what gave Portland the edge. That you've got to have that balance, as I said at the beginning of this segment, between being really good defensively and actually being able to put the ball in the net. And he's that guy that has sort of taken that mantle from Diego Valeri for the most part. He was sensational. I would also have him as the tournament MVP, so obviously he needs to be on my best 11. And on the right side, I put Diego Rossi. 7 goals, 3 assists in 5 games. I mean, come on now. He was scoring goals for fun. And he's the reason that LAFC didn't skip a beat without Carlos Vela. They don't need Carlos Vela. They're still the best team in this league from a talent perspective without Carlos Vela. Rossi's a big reason why. Much like Atuesta, I just don't care that they got knocked out that early. He was better at scoring goals than anybody in this tournament. He was phenomenal, as he always is. And then at striker, I went with Ayo Akinola. I went back and forth a little bit here. I thought about Jeremy Obobasi. I thought about Sergio Santos from Philadelphia. Thought about Chris Wondolowski. But at the end of the day, Akinola scored 5 goals in 3 games. And in addition to Williamson, was sort of the guy that stole the show at this tournament in terms of raising their profile. And for a Toronto team that was beat up front, that needed somebody to put the ball in the net, he answered in a big, big way. And now we know who Ayo Akinola is, and he's going to be a phenomenal player in this league, and then he's probably going to go to Europe and do the same thing. He's great. This was his coming out party, so I wanted to include him. There just wasn't a out and out striker to me that stood out ahead of everybody else, because Diego Rossi was the best goal scorer in this tournament. It just created this weird thing where a lot of your better strikers went out rather early, and so it put him in. I even thought about for a second Bradley Wright Phillips, another LAFC player. I couldn't justify that, but nobody was scoring more goals with the exception of Rossi than Ayo Akinola. So that's my pick. Again, the 11, Andre Blake in net, Ruan at right back, Dario Zuparic at center back, Mark McKenzie at center back, John Matinho left back, Eric Williamson, Edward Atuesta holding mids, Nani, Sebastian Blanco, Diego Rossi in a attacking midfield 3, and Ayo Akinola up top. This was just a really fun tournament. I enjoyed how seriously teams took it. I enjoyed the fact that MLS actually put some incentives into it. I loved the fact, we didn't really get to talk about this too much, but I loved the fact that those group stage games counted as regular season games, which in most situations is just not going to be feasible or realistic or logical. But it absolutely made sense here because you got to find a way to get more regular season games in. And if you're going to fly all those teams down to Orlando and you're going to go into a bubble, you got to make it count for something more than just 2 games. There were teams that were eliminated 2 games in, but you're still playing a regular season game in that 3rd game. So that was a really good solution to that problem. Hats off to everybody that made this happen. I thought it was great, and now we're getting close to we're getting close to everybody resuming play in Major League Soccer. Nashville and Dallas started last night. We'll talk about that a little bit and what's next. But I love this league because it's so unpredictable and so many strange things happen. And you, again, got those semifinals of teams that are not traditional powers. But Portland is the only one of those teams that has experience in these kind of situations, that knows what it's like to win an MLS Cup or to even play for one, And they were more upset and disappointed in the loss to Atlanta 2 seasons ago than I thought they would be, which sounds sort of strange to say, I just didn't think they would talk about it as much as they. It seemed to be a theme with this team that they really felt like they should have had another MLS Cup in there. And so you get Orlando in a tournament setting with an opportunity to sort of make amends for that. They took full advantage. I really like Giovanni Severese. I think he doesn't get enough credit for the job he's done with this team and just transitioning it from the Caleb Porter era. They haven't missed a beat. They're always one of the better teams in this league. They're always a threat to win when you get knockouts because you got a player like Diego Chara. You've got so much experience from top to bottom on this team. This group has been together. So congratulations again to the Portland Timbers. Shout out to everybody that made this tournament happen. And that's a wrap on MLS is Back. We're going to take another break right here. When we come back, what's next? Looking at the rest of these Champions League matchups, Europa League semifinals, all of that stuff. You're watching Touchline Talk on 110 Sports. Welcome back once again to Touchline Talk. It is that time to look ahead to what's next. Absolutely loaded schedule here this weekend. We've got some sort of European competition the next 5 days, which is absolutely phenomenal. And that starts this afternoon. Atletico Madrid, Red Bull Leipzig, Champions League quarterfinals. Leipzig was more than just Timo Werner. I mean, of course, but at the same time, this is not the same team without him, especially because they haven't had a chance to replace him. This is not a sort of regrouped, retooled version of Julian Nagelsmann's team. This is the same squad that took out Tottenham minus Werner, which is still a very good team, one of the third best team in Germany. Whereas you compare that to Atletico Madrid, who've actually had the opportunity to replace Antoine Griezmann, particularly in the form of João Felix. But this is an interesting matchup for me just because Leipzig, high energy, high press, tactical ingenuity from your young, brilliant mind, and Nagelsmann on the sideline. And Diego Simeone's Atletico Madrid, you know exactly what you're getting from them. They are as fundamentally sound defensively as it comes. You saw what they did to Liverpool. They, again, have a history in this tournament. They are really good in knockout situations because, again, they have that nice balance of they got some different difference makers going forward, and also are just so good in defense is in the core of what they do. So this is another one of those tactical where PSG Atalanta you saw a lot of the same ideas that both teams really wanted to play. This is a tactical clash between two very different styles, which to me is always fun. So the key to the game then becomes which team is able to impose their will. Can Leipzig get the tempo up and find a way to generate chances without Werner, or can Atleti just be Atleti and grind this thing out and get into the semifinals? If I'm PSG, I don't want any part of Atleti. I still would say PSG are the favorites and the better team against those two, but I would much rather play Leipzig. I would much rather go toe to toe with a similar, expansive, open game like you saw against Atalanta and take my chances than trying to deal with the behemoth that is Simeone's teams in knockout rounds. Just ask Jurgen Klopp how that went. Atleti did have a couple players that tested positive for COVID, which put this game in a little bit of jeopardy, but it seems like everybody else has come back clean, which is terrific news. So those two players are Angel Correa and Simi Versalco. Versalco is not going to play in this game anyway, so that both of them are out. But Simeone still has plenty of options in terms of where he wants to go. The question of what do you do up top with Diego Costa and or Alvaro Morata is going to be one of the more interesting things to see what formation Simeone comes out, who he decides to go with as his striker, whether he puts both of them on the field. I would think it's one or the other just because putting two strikers and João Felix on the field seems a little ambitious for Simeone, especially at this stage of the Champions League. But we'll see. Like I said, they have difference makers going forward. They're really good defensively. And Leipzig feels like they can still do this thing even though they don't have their talisman, their goal scorer, and Werner. They've got other options up top. Particularly, I'm looking at Yusuf Poulsen as the guy that's got to sort of try and fill that void. But I like Atletico Madrid in this game. They're just the better team, the more experienced team who's been here before. And that matters a great deal to me, especially in a situation like this where it's 90 minutes, one shot. You got to find a way to actually get the ball in their net, and that is not an easy thing to do. And then we've got the big matchup, the premier event, Barcelona-Bayern Munich. Alphonso Davies missed training on Wednesday, but he should be good to go. And now you've got Hans-Clyde Rummenigge saying that if Messi lines up on Alphonso Davies' side of the field, he's not too concerned about it because not many people dribble past Alphonso Davies, which is fairly accurate, a little bold, and also just an incredible testament to how far Alphonso Davies has come and how good of a player he is. Also want to point out that Alphonso Davies is a Vancouver Whitecaps MLS Academy guy who came through Major League Soccer. I found that comment very interesting. But he should be, on a more serious note, he should be good to go for this game. It's going to be interesting to see if Barcelona actually puts Messi on that side of the field and goes after him. I can't imagine that they would, because it's not like he's shown any inexperience or that he is a potential target or a weak point in this Bayern team at all. He's been phenomenal since he got that starting left back job. I mentioned this briefly on Tuesday, but Barcelona get Sergio Busquets and Arturo Vidal back, which is huge because that bench was rather uninspiring, to say the least, in the round of 16 against Napoli. It was just basically your young guys who just are not ready to be playing at this level yet. So Barcelona's got some more experienced players in there, some more options to go to when you're going to make your substitutions. And Ousmane Dembele is in this squad. Quique Setien said he's not 100% yet, so we don't know exactly how healthy he is. But he's there. He is eligible to play. We'll see. I can't imagine he starts, but he could very well wind up on the bench. Who knows if he's actually going to feature in this game. But that is noteworthy that he has progressed enough to the point where they're putting him in the team and giving an opportunity for him to make a difference in this game. I'm going with Bayern. I just really like where this team is at right now. They've had some time off, which I feel like makes a difference, where Barcelona has had to deal with the frustration and disappointment of how things played out in La Liga. And they got banged up along the way. You still don't have Samuel Umtiti. So I'm going with Bayern. Anything's possible with Messi. That's stating the obvious. But I think Barcelona's road ends here, and then you got to start asking yourself some tough questions about where they go moving forward. Saturday, our final Champions League quarterfinal matchup. Lyon, Manchester City. Of course, Manchester City the favorites here. I fully expect them to go through, especially because Lyon is facing some injury concerns. Former Manchester City player, actually, Jason Denayer, is doubtful for this game. He went off injured against Juventus. We'll see what kind of role he can play, if any. And Maxwell Cornet, who is one of the more important players to what Lyon does, is also hurt. I'm more optimistic he's going to play. He might even start. I don't know how bad the injury is. But it's worth noting that they are not at 100%. And when you're playing Manchester City, you need to be at 100%. And again, to go to the Atalanta thing that I was talking about in the open of this show about, they got a chance to do this again next year. It's not like this is Lyon, where Lyon were not good in France this year. They don't have European competition next year. So they're playing with house money and just you don't have an opportunity to go build off of something. You got to regroup and requalify next year. Whereas Atalanta are coming right back into the group stage of the Champions League. So, the combination of Manchester City being the better team, the fact that Lyon have already beaten one of the premier teams in the world in the Juventus, it's a huge ask to go then do it to Manchester City. And the fact that Lyon just haven't been in great form this year and have been rather disappointing. I'm going Manchester City. I think this is Bayern Munich and Manchester City's competition to lose. And that would set up a Bayern-Manchester City semi, which would be phenomenal. Because the other side of that bracket, going back to the Atletico Madrid thing, PSG, Atletico Madrid, Leipzig, that thing is wide open. So if you can get through the semis, you absolutely can go to the final, and then who knows what happens. You got a different challenge when you've got Barcelona, Bayern Munich, and Manchester City in your group of four to even get to the final. And then we got the Europa League. Manchester United, Sevilla. I mentioned before Sevilla's pedigree in this tournament. Manchester United is the best team remaining. I would put Sevilla third. I would say United are best, then Inter, then Sevilla, then Shakhtar. That's a pretty clear order to me. But again, this is a Sevilla team that has plenty of experience winning games like this and knocking off opponents like this. This is nothing new to them. I'm really curious to see just how invested Manchester United are, because if Manchester United don't come to play, Sevilla's going to beat them. But if United show up and put in a good performance, you're just asking a lot to have Sevilla go and do this again after what they did to Wolves. And for all of the possession and all of the good things that Sevilla did in the second half of that game, they didn't actually put that much pressure on the Wolves' goal. It wasn't the most comprehensive attacking performance. They were just on the ball and the aggressor in the whole second half, controlling the game. You got to take your chances. You got to create more chances if you're going to beat Manchester United. So I'm going to say Manchester United go through. That the idea of getting a trophy this season is enough. And you've got the second Nashville-Dallas game. I also wanted to mention this briefly. David Accam scores a late goal for Nashville last night to give them the 1-0 win in Dallas in front of fans, which I don't want to go down that road right now. It just seems very strange. It made me feel uncomfortable knowing that there were fans watching a Major League Soccer game right now. But it's Texas. You also had a situation where a fan got ejected before the game for criticizing and throwing stuff, I believe, at players who were kneeling. You should go read Reggie Cannon, the FC Dallas right back and U.S. national team members' comments on his thoughts about the things that transpired. Very well spoken. He's a very intelligent guy who's going to do big things moving forward. So go check out what he said if you want to learn more about the off the field stuff that happened with fans in the stands last night. But this is round 2. All of a sudden, if Dallas can't pull this one off, they're in some trouble, and Nashville would have 2 wins despite not playing in MLS's back. So congratulations to Nashville on their first win as an MLS team. That's something else that should be acknowledged. David Accam just continues to find ways to score goals in this league, no matter what team he's playing for, which is just a testament to how good of a player he is. He just hasn't found a home, but he's really good. He's really dangerous, and you saw it again last night. And then finally, Inter Milan, Shakhtar Donetsk, the other semifinal of the Europa League, on Monday, August 17th. I'm going with Inter. To me, this is where Shakhtar's road ends. Inter is absolutely the better team. Lukaku's playing well. You throw Christian Eriksen into the mix. They're getting ready to go compete for Serie A next season with the uncertainty surrounding Juventus. They might even be the favorites. That's how far this team has come. This is an experienced group that understands how to win in these kind of environments, that has played in the Champions League. Most of these players, Christian Eriksen was in a final last season. I really like what this Inter team is doing, so I'm gonna say they get through fairly comfortably, which sets up an Inter Manchester United final theoretically, or even an Inter Sevilla final. Would be really, really good. 2 high quality teams. When you get to this is the point of the Europa League where you really start to enjoy these matchups, and it feels like the Champions League because you've got some of these smaller teams out of the way that you just don't have when you get to the round of the knockout stage of the Champions League. So, all kinds of good stuff going on. Enjoy the soccer. Again, every single day, something to watch. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. It's tremendous. Let's take it in now, because all of a sudden, once these tournaments end, there's going to be a little break where we don't have high-level European competition every day. So, that's all we have for today's show. Thank you so much for watching. Enjoy your weekend. We'll be back on Tuesday. But before that, Chris Brown comes in just over an hour, 1 p.m. Eastern, with Around the Bases. Josh Molnix will be back to finish out our week at 11 a.m. Eastern tomorrow. But that's all we have for you today on Touchline Talk. Thanks so much for listening. We'll see you Tuesday.